literally I stopped in the middle of episode 2, and which I was watching, I think yesterday, and I literally stopped and like walked into my mom's room and was like, "You have to watch this documentary." And she, because yeah. And so it was like literally, and I'll comment more on that because I wanted to say something. I was like, that would be good to say in the episode once I officially introduce it. So I'm gonna pause, but yeah, like I was like.
You're listening to Enhance, the podcast dedicated to highlighting real stories told by real people.
Hello, Enhance listeners. Thank you so much for tuning back into another episode of Enhance Season 2. And today I'm joined by Chase again. And you guys probably remember him from Season 1, where we talked about the opioid crisis. Say hi, Chase.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? Good to be back.
Yeah, and we were going to record this last season, but some random unexpected things happened in Chase's life. Chase, if you want to talk about it a little bit, only what you're comfortable with sharing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So about last year on October 18th, my daughter was born, which, it's a big thing for anybody, when they first become a parent, but it was especially crazy for us, my fiance and I, because we didn't know. So, it was just, she didn't have any symptoms really. She wasn't showing at all. Like even when she went into labor, we didn't know that was what's happening because we hadn't prepared for that, hadn't really, wasn't expected at all. But so we brought her into the hospital and they were like, "Oh yeah, you're in labor." And we kind of looked at each other like, what? And so that was a pretty crazy switch. I'm not gonna lie, just waking up one morning and just going from, regular mid-20s dude to father. But it's been, one of the greatest blessings. It's been so awesome. She's gonna be a year next month, which is crazy. The time flies. She was born and then everything was all fast forward. So
yeah. I remember I texted you, I think it was like the day we were supposed to record or something like that, or maybe it was the day before, just to check in, because I usually do that with people. But like, hey, so we still good for a little while, or like in whatever time. And you were like, hey, so. And I was like, what? That is it, because you always see, like, I remember I talked about that show, not sponsored or anything, but that show on TLC, I think that's what we were talking about earlier, that it was, I didn't know I was pregnant. And I was like, you see that on TV and you hear stories, but knowing somebody that happened to, I'm like, what? But like, I don't know, like I'm I'm very like spiritual and everything, and like we used to talk about things like that in college too, and I'm a big believer in like everything happens the way it's meant to, and I'm just like, if that's not a like sign from the universe that you're meant to be a dad, I don't know what is.
Oh, totally, 100%. It's been absolutely unreal. It's the craziest part was, I was so nervous, when we were going into the delivery room and everything, just like, I haven't done any thinking about like how to be a father. I haven't prepared myself for this. But then as soon as my daughter was here and I was holding her, it was almost just like a switch went off in my head, and it became instinct. Just, okay, I do these things this way, I do this thing this way, so it's a lot more instinctual than you would expect. It just kind of, your brain just kind of takes over, just like, all right, this is how you do this, which has been a huge help.
I know you've always been a very just like chill, go with the flow, like no BS, no drama kind of person too. So I could see how like something like that would happen and you'd just be like, all right, this is what life is now. Like just like you're right into it.
Exactly. I mean, you got to play the cards you're dealt, and it's been the ride of a lifetime, man. Just watching her grow over the past year, it's been crazy.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. And I'm glad that it all worked out and everything. And like, I think that if there was anybody that this would randomly happen to, I think you're one of the best people for it to happen to. Because like I said, you're just like a chill, go with like which I'm gay, so there's no chance that I would, have a baby on the way and not know about it. But like, if that randomly happened to me, I would know where to go. I wouldn't know what to do. I mean, I would be nurturing. I know that much. Like, I know I would be a good like caretaker, but I'd be like, how to make a doctor's appointment for a baby? Like Googling like.
Oh yeah. How to get my child added to my health insurance?
Yeah.
all those little steps. And it's been a year. It's been a year, and we're still figuring out some of the things.
Yeah. He's like, how to claim a dependent on my taxes, you know, like random things like that too. But yeah, that's crazy. But I mean, you know, I feel like that's something that probably a lot of first-time parents go through too, especially if they don't have the opportunity to really plan with anybody who's had a child, like, you know, if they aren't close with their parents or something like that. But I still can imagine that it would be like to another level whenever you had no idea, like, you know, it just randomly happens. So
Oh, definitely. I mean, when we first like heard the news and they had her getting her ready for delivery, I mean, they had just as many nurses on me as they had on her because I was ghost white, just like, what is happening? Like, this is the craziest morning of my life.
you're like, did I step into a different timeline? Was there like a timeline shift? What's happening? You know, like, like you're like having an out of body experience, like,
you're like, drink this water, drink this water. This happens way more often than you think it does.
oh wow, they said that.
Oh yeah, I mean, they
Wow.
say they see the hospital we were at. I think they said they see one of these like, you know, once every couple weeks to a month. You know, so it's really not as uncommon as, you know, people might think it is. But it was crazy.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. Well, again, congrats, and I'm glad that it all worked out and that you're happy and that you guys are happy and healthy and that it seems like it's going awesome.
Oh yeah, been the greatest blessing ever.
So I do have an icebreaker for us today, and this one, I know that we literally just talked for a good like probably 10 minutes about like what's been going on in your life and everything, but I still wanted to do this icebreaker because I think it's a little bit of a special one. So tomorrow is on the day that we're recording this, it's September 10th, and so tomorrow is 9/11, but on that's, you know, very sad, you know, like, and I want to make sure that I pay respect to that and everything. But tomorrow is also your birthday, isn't it, Chase?
Yes, that is correct.
Did you know that it's also Gabby's birthday too? The like co-host of the
did know
podcast. Yeah,
I
because
did,
I
yeah.
figured you did. Yeah, because that's normally something that it's like, oh, your birthday's on 9/11, and then when you meet somebody who also has a birthday on 9/11, you're like, ah, we're both on, you know. So like, I feel like that's something that would connect you because like I'm not born on a devastating day like that, but like, and not saying that your birthday is devastating because you're also obviously an awesome human, and I'm very glad that you were born. So, and so is Gabby. So, you know, I actually have now that I think about it, I have a lot of people I know that were born on 9/11 that I'm like, they're some of the best people I know. But that like, you know, I was born, my birthday is March 15th, and that's the Ides of March. And
Yeah.
it's known as like the day of bad luck and the day of chaos. And it was like the day that Julius Caesar was murdered, according to like the play, not the, I don't know if that's actually when he was murdered in real life or not. But so whenever I like for the longest time did not know anybody that had the same birthday as me. And then I finally like met somebody one time, I can't even remember who it was. And I was like, hey, and like I had this like really big reaction to it. And they were like, cool. And I was like, okay, thanks. You know, like, but yeah, it was just a cool connection. But to one, say happy birthday to you is one why I wanted to bring that up, and also give Gabby a shout out and say, of course, and say happy birthday to her too. And so for the icebreaker today, if you're cool with it and if you're comfortable with it, I'd love for you to like share what one of your like most like favorite birthday memories has been throughout your life.
Okay.
And if you have multiple, that's okay. I know I put you on the spot there, so.
So it's interesting because I mean, when my birthday rolls around every year, you know, since it's my fourth birthday, you know, in 2001, it's always been like a weird, kind of bittersweet day, you know, because I mean, yeah, it's my birthday and I'm excited to celebrate it, but it's also, you know, a constant reminder that my birthday was, you know, has been overshadowed, you know, and I mean, I remember, you know, on my fourth birthday, you know, like watching the, you know, I'm blowing out my candles and the TV's on in the background, you know, towers are falling and stuff like that. And it was just like the weirdest kind of duality there. And that happens every year, you know, like in high school, you know, I'd show up for my birthday and it's just like, all right, we're wheeling the TV and we're going to watch all this footage. And I'm just like, you know, okay, cool.
Happy birthday to me.
But I do have some really great birthday memories, and I've made some like really good bonds with people over that actually. I would say probably one of my greatest birthday memories was when I was at Spring Hill with you, and my parents came up to Mobile, and they had rented a condo in Dolphin Island, and they were just like, all right, we're 30 minutes away in Dolphin Island, we're on the beach, pack up a bunch of your friends, head out here, and we'll just, do the day on the beach. And, when I was at Spring Hill, I was at Dolphin Island once a week. That's one of my favorite places on earth. So that was just especially special, be there, with my family and my friends and just doing that. And, every year it's like, I want to do something kind of big and unusual like that to kind of distract from it. And some years it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but when it does, it's always really nice. But another interesting thing is like you were talking about, every time I meet someone who has a September 11th birthday, it's always just like immediate, just like, okay, you understand the weird duality of your birthday and how it is like the most kind of bittersweet thing ever. It's just, great things, bad things, great things, bad things. And I remember there was one time I was at a gas station, and I was getting some beer for a party, and the guy asked for my ID. This old guy behind the counter. I hand him my ID, and he looks at it. He goes, "Huh, 9/11 birthday, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know." It gets mentioned every time I have to give someone my ID. I get used to it, but he mentions it, and I was just like, "Okay, just another person making a comment. Happens all the time." And then he looks at me and goes, "Me too." And I was like, and it was immediate, just like, "Whoa, okay, you get it. And now he's always working there. I think he's actually the manager at that gas station. It's right around the corner from me now. So every time I see him in there, it's just always like, okay, we have an understanding on this one thing.
Yeah, it's like that unspoken bond.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
That's so
things
cool.
only needs to be brought up once, and you're just always going to remember that, because it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, he understands something that not many people do about me.
Definitely, yeah, that makes sense. I think that's like a it's hard in situations like that to find like positivity, and to like not feel like guilty. I feel like for like wanting to celebrate that day, but like I know, and this is me speaking from someone who, again, like I was not born on that day, so and there is no like really. I have something actually. Wow, this is a unlocked memory. On my birthday, one year, there was one of my like childhood friends, or he was a family friend. It was my sister's like one of her childhood boyfriends, but we were just like, it was one of those situations where it's like our family was friends with his, and so even whenever he and my sister like broke up, it was like it wasn't bad blood or beef or anything like that. Like he was still a really respectful guy and everything, and we just all loved him a lot. And I looked at him a lot like an older brother once we like got older and he became like an adult and everything. And he actually passed away on my birthday one year, and so that was something that for the first couple of years after that, like my mom, I remember she would cry on my birthday, and I was always like, "What's wrong?" And she was like, "Sorry, I'm just thinking about," and I won't say his name or anything, but I'm just thinking about him. And I was like, "Oh, I got you." And so there for a little bit, I just kind of like stopped wanting to celebrate my birthday on that day. And so my immediate reaction was like, "Okay, I'll just celebrate it on a different day." And so I started like doing like the weekend before, the weekend after, And now I realize like I've kept that kind of mentality where like on my birthday, I just almost dissociate from it. And I don't think that's like, for me, it's not a bad thing because it's not a monumental national day like what 9/11 is. But for like me, just on like, so I guess in my head, I was just like, I'll just kind of skip my birthday and wait until the weekend or something like that. But I can imagine that's kind of difficult to do like every year whenever it's like a huge monumental thing, because then it's the reminder of like, oh, well, this is my actual birthday when anybody asks. But I think that that's really important, just to try and find positivity, in it and still celebrate you.
And I mean, there are ways to do things like that. I mean, so my parents were really good at that, and it helped because my younger sister, she was born 2 years after me, 2 years and 2 days. So her birthday is September 13th, and so it was always joint birthday parties since our birthdays are so close together, and so we always kind of the 12th, that middle day where it's neither of our birthdays. That was always kind of the big day to celebrate both of the
Oh,
birthdays.
yeah.
So it worked
I
out
love
that way.
that. Cool. Well, I am going to use that as a segue if that's cool, because there are some things that I want to keep talking about with what like this like topic and everything, because I feel like just knowing you and knowing your sister, and I met your mom and dad one time too at Spring Hill.
Mhm.
I can't remember exactly when it was, but I think they were there for like a Badger Day, or maybe it was like when your sister was getting ready to start coming to Spring Hill or something like that. There was some instance where they were there and I got to meet them. But to introduce our topic today, we are continuing. This is our part 2 of the opioid crisis, and I did get to start the documentary series that Chase mentioned in the first part, and it's called The Pharmacist, and it's on Netflix. And so I'm about halfway through the 3rd episode. It's a 4-episode miniseries, but something that really struck me in it was like how close that family bond was between the main person that it's following, which is Dan Schneider. Is that
Dan Schneider? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and his family, and we can talk about the plot a little bit. I don't want to give too many spoilers. So if you plan on watching it, definitely go watch it. But we are going to be talking about it in this episode. So definitely, like just have a heads up that there are some spoilers, but I would urge anyone to stay and listen, just because I was not expecting how like impactful that documentary was. I knew it would be a big, very just important message, but the things that this man goes on there and like vulnerably talks about, like the strain on his family, the like racism that was put into this whole situation, like corrupt police officers, but then also like police officers and law and like the DEA, DEA trying to like do what they were supposed to do, but not realizing there were like internal forces and things like that, just a whole thing. But something that really stood out to me just watching it, knowing that you're the one who recommended it to me, is that I remember that you and your little sister, and I'm not going to say her name just because like I haven't gotten her permission or anything, but I was friends with both of y'all at different points in time and everything at Spring Hill. And so this something that was, and also to clarify that, because I worded that weird, I got to meet your sister, I became friends with both of you individually. So it wasn't like, oh, you're Chase's little sister. It was like I got to meet her, which was really cool. So that's what I meant by at different points in time. And so it was just really cool from both of your standpoints, hearing how close your family was. Because like I love my family and I love my mom and I love my dad. And last episode that I recorded, which was one with Hughes and Ben, we talked about our family like a little bit, and I talked about my dad and the relationship I got to build with him before he passed, because he and I just weren't close up to that point. And so I'm very grateful for the family I have and for the connections I have. But you and your sister have like such a that was something that I always admired, was how loving your family was. And seeing this documentary, it was very easy for me to go, this would be Chase's dad. This would be Chase. This would be Chase's. It was a very and I can see why you would relate to that too. And I'd love for you to also, if you're comfortable with it, expand on that personal feeling that you may have gotten when watching that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd be first to admit that my family is super close, very close. My parents at this point, they're more my friends than my parents. And that's great. And I know not a lot of people really get to that point with their families, unfortunately. So, when I talk to people about my family, there's always just I don't want to say like jealousy, but there's always just like a sense of when I'm talking about my family to someone who doesn't have a similar family dynamic, there's just like a sense of longing, in them, just like, man, like that sounds like the ideal way for a family to be. And I would agree, and that has been the type of family I've been trying to build for my daughter, because of how influential it was on my life, and how much how important it was to me to have that, growing up with my parents and then make that transition, around mid-college, where it was just like, okay, we're on the same page here. We're now peers essentially, so that and just hang out, talk about life. And just can't, it's open door policy. Anytime I have any kind of issue, I can go to my mom or my dad or even my sister and just be like, hey, this is what's going on. And it's great to always have someone there to hear you out like that. And so in regards to relating to the family in the documentary, I really, I mean, now that I didn't notice at the time, but now that you mentioned that, I really did feel like a connection to the family, but specifically to Dan, in the way that, like you said, he behaves, or in the documentary, he behaved as my father would have in that situation, just like, okay, the authorities that have jurisdiction over this aren't doing their jobs properly. If I can get the information that they need on my own, that's what I would do, and that's how dedicated both my parents are to our family, how dedicated I and my fiance are to our family. It's just, you know, it's a great thing, and it's something that unfortunately I feel like people don't see a lot of anymore. And
Yeah.
just trying to now I'm in the position to kind of lead by example. I have a bunch of friends of mine here in Baton Rouge that are having kids now, and they're asking me questions, and I'm just like, you know, well, I mean, I'm not that far ahead of them, but I can tell you what we do and what we're striving for as a family.
Yeah. And again, I know I said this in the beginning, but I think you're the perfect person to do that because you do just have such a calm demeanor about things. And like, I think that that's really great. And I can see again why, like, you might have been the person to be put in the situation that you were in now that you have like almost like a group of people that you're kind of leading by example for. And that is like just such a powerful thing because like I even found myself during the documentary, like when Dan was doing certain things, I was like, you're going to get killed. Like almost like I was dissuading him in a way. But then I was sitting there thinking and I was like, well, I have no room to judge this man. Like, you know what I'm saying? And not that I was being judgmental toward him, but I was just like, you've got to like chill. Like you are an old, like not saying that in a mean way, but like you're an older dude. You're out here in like the Ninth Ward. You're out here dealing with people that you don't know, that you don't understand. Like you like, and one thing that I thought was so powerful and that was such a good thing that like immediately drew me into the first episode was that there was a point where he was talking about how you would hear about things that happen in the Ninth Ward and like kids overdosing, kids like getting shot, stuff like that all the time. And he said like, you know, at that point in time, because there were also like racial things with it too, he immediately would think, and he was like, unfortunately, like I was one of those people that thought that way and believed that way, but I would think, well, good, serves them right. Like they shouldn't be doing this stuff, you know? And then when it was his son and that is what happened, spoiler alert, that his son was in the Ninth Ward and got shot. And when that happened to him, and he's like a white man, you know, a pharmacist, and like has like the whole like picket fence life, like, you know, a wife, 2 kids, like a son and daughter, like happy life. They traveled a lot. And that was something that was like him expressing how impacted he was by it and how shocking it was for him. And like that was so impactful to me. But then also, I'm constantly keeping that in mind throughout the episode where I'm like, this dude has no street cred. And I'm not meaning that in a bad way or anything, but like, it's like he is just now stepping into this world and has no idea how it works. And, you know, and like how even, spoiler alert again, just a heads up, one of the guys that he talks to at the very beginning ended up being the person who killed his son. And he never even suspected it. He just trusted this guy. And I'm like, you don't know the world that you're stepping into. And like, good for you for having this drive as a parent, but like you have no idea the world you're stepping into, you know? And that was just so like mind boggling. But I think the reason why I thought about you guys the whole time is just because like, you know me, I'm a very deep thinking person. Whenever I have friends that I care about and stuff like that, I remember things like that about them. And I immediately like just seeing it and knowing that you're the person who recommended it and how much you were driven by it. I did the whole time. I was like, this is probably what like Chase's family is like. This is their reactions to things. And then also I remember in episode 1, you talked about too how you struggled a little bit with opioids because of like a prescription that you were given. And so I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm like, I'm grateful that Chase was able to like have self-awareness and get away from that and everything. But like if he would have ended up in this situation and I would have, you know, like not known him or something like that, and this is what happened, this would be his dad. Like it would, like in an alternate reality, not to be that person, but in an alternate reality, it very easily could have shifted and been like, that's your dad on TV, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. I've actually met Dan a couple times through my job.
Really?
Yeah, I've interviewed him a couple times for the news organization I work for. He's fantastic, and it's interesting you bring up the parallel between him and my dad because honestly, when I you know I had the camera set up and I had a mic up and everything, and you know was rolling on that, and it was not like when I normally film an interview. It's just question answer, question answer, question answer. With him, there was already a sort of comfort there because he reminded me so much of my dad, and so it was more just a conversation, and I could tell he'd been used to reporters coming up to him just very formal question answer, and I think it was a little refreshing for him when I spoke to him as a human being instead of just a subject on camera,
Yeah.
and that was expressing that I was genuinely interested in what he's doing, that I've seen his work and that I really appreciate what he does because I don't know, I mean, he goes out to events around the state and the country. He's really big into fighting the fentanyl epidemic right now. That's been a big thing, especially in our area of Louisiana. And I mean that there is no one more dedicated to this cause than that dude. He lives this stuff.
Yeah. There's actually, that you bring that up and everything, there are a couple of people that are very, very like near and dear to my heart that listen to the podcast, and they listen to, like, they're big fans of the episode that you and I did together, and still on Apple Podcasts, it's like one of the highest performing episodes that I've done. And so
Really?
and so I had a friend, and I'm gonna again just be very careful saying like names or anything like that, because they are very open about it, so it's very easy to find who it is and everything. But just out of privacy for them and respect for them, I haven't gotten their permission to mention anything, so I'm just gonna keep it very vague. But in the grief episode from season 1, I talked about a friend of mine who passed from a fentanyl overdose, and like I believe I mentioned it in our episode too. And they, like, when they listened to our episode, they reached out and they were like, this is a phenomenal episode. And they were like, we shared it with every single person we know that knew, like, our family member that, like, because it's his mom and sister. And they're like, we shared it with every single person we know that, like, was impacted by this, because this was so informative and reminded us, like, because it's really easy when you have someone who, like, passes from something like that. It's so easy to go down a rabbit hole of, did I do something wrong? Did I impact their life wrong? Were they going through something? Were they in bad things that I don't know about? Things like that. But then to have, like, someone sitting there talking, be like, no, our system's just absolutely effed up. Like, the whole system is broken. And it's not just responsibility on one party or another party. It's like the whole thing is messed up. And, like, even the people who are putting this stuff out there, they're just doing what they were given the power to do. And like that, like, it's big impactful, and they are like some of the biggest fans of that episode. And so you bringing that up, like, that's what he passed from, was fentanyl overdose. And I think that is cool that you mentioned that, and that that it's still, that it's something that even in the documentary that we're talking about, like, that guy is still pushing now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean the fentanyl stuff has just, I mean, it's only been getting worse. The event I interviewed him at actually was out in Livingston Parish, Louisiana, which is low ways from me, but that area has it so bad that people are finding, high school kids, they're going to smoke shops getting a disposable vape that has fentanyl in it, like, in a box on a shelf that you could just buy in a store, and it's just like, the people who create this, what do you get out of that?
Yeah.
It really makes no sense. And I don't know, it's interesting that we got this together for this time of year, because I feel like one of the big examples of when people started realizing that the fentanyl crisis was getting as big as it was 5 years ago, a couple days ago, when Mac Miller passed away from cut drugs. And I feel like at that point in time when he passed away, people had heard about the crisis. They knew it was happening, but that was what made it reality for them. They were just, oh God, this isn't happening to just, low lives buying drugs on the street. This is happening to anybody, and the sad thing is, I mean, it can happen to anybody. They were just talking at that event I mentioned. They were talking about the disposable vapes with fentanyl in it. This girl, she'd been buying disposable vapes for over a year, and just picked up one morning, went to school, was in the bathroom, taking a hit, and overdosed on the floor, just right there from one hit. And it's just like, it's just unreal, man.
It's very, I mean, it's literally, it makes you afraid to do anything, and I mean, and I'm not one of those people. I've never had an issue with just, like, buying things off the street, but like you're saying, this is like a disposable vape, like, and it just, like, it's literally like, it makes you afraid to do anything, like, something that you think could be harmless and chilled, like, could have something laced,
Yeah, it's starting to find its way into regulated products, which, as a father, that is super concerning. I mean, it's terrifying, really. I mean, it's in disposable vapes now, which, yeah, I mean, some people could make the argument like, oh, well, you shouldn't be, vaping nicotine to begin with. That's your own fault. But if it's making it there where these are licensed and regulated products that have fentanyl in them, where else can it go? Are people just going to be finding fentanyl in their Pepsis, or
Yeah.
like where does it end?
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's very hard not to fall into that like road of like, and I don't want to say paranoia because I mean, to a sense it would be, but also like it is a reality we live in. So it's almost like it's bordering between caution and paranoia. So it's like, yeah, if you went around thinking that fentanyl was in everything, you would be considered paranoid, but also like it could be, like it's literally like it's just such a scary place to be at. But one thing that I do like about this episode that I didn't think that like we would be doing is we're focusing a lot on family, which I think is really interesting because we did talk about that some in the first episode where like I talked about my sister and everything like struggling with addiction. But now you have a whole other aspect, like you said, as a father, that's even more concerning now. You're seeing this not as someone who once had like, struggles with opioids, but now you're seeing it as someone that like you have a little one that you want to protect with everything in you. And I think that that's a very interesting, other standpoint that we have now a little over a year later.
Yeah, I mean, having a kid really changes your perspective on a lot of stuff, but that's the biggest thing that's hard nowadays. Is it's so like difficult to ensure your child's safety with stuff like this going around. I know so many families that have just like been absolutely torn apart over something like this happening. Just high school kid goes and gets into something maybe he shouldn't have been getting into to begin with, but that's what high school kids do. And then he ODs, and they don't know where to go from there. They don't know who to point the finger at. They don't know how to proceed, how to properly mourn and grieve their child. And it's heartbreaking to see. It really is. And
Yeah.
I mean, it happens a lot here. It happens a lot. I mean, it's probably, especially working in the news. I mean, a lot of times it's people I don't know, but like a lot of times it's also people I do know, and so it's really really sad to see the effect that fentanyl overdose, whether intentional or accidental, can have on families. It's terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one time that in college, there's a memory that I have like of whenever you and I were talking one time, and I hope this is okay, and if it's not, let me know, and we can make sure that it doesn't make it to the final like part of the episode. But I remember we were talking one time, and you were talking about how there was something that was giving you a lot of anxiety, and I was like, well, I was like, like later on we got to talk about it, and I was like, are you feeling any better? Like, what happened, or whatever. And you're like, yeah, I just went and talked to my dad. And I was like, oh, did he like give you advice or something? You're like, no, he just like listened and like, reassured me everything was gonna be okay. And like, I just feel better about it. And I was like, that's like such a like, like, and I mean, I talk to my mom sometimes too. Like I have, especially like because something we just always like, I grew up poor, and she worked her ass off to make sure that like I didn't feel the effects of being poor at different points in life. Like there was one point I remember she was working 5 jobs and she was a single mom. And so like something that she always pushed in me was like a really strong work ethic. But unfortunately, something else that I inherited was like that fear of being financially unstable. And so like this year I've had to become very comfortable with having like fluctuating money. Like, so at the beginning of this year, I was working a job where I was making like 2,500 a week, and like that's a huge amount more than anything I've ever made before. But now I'm like making hardly anything a week because of the strikes that are going on. And I've had to find other ways to bring in like money here and there. And so when I have like financial struggles, because that's something that me and my mom just relate to each other on, she's one of the first people I'll call just kind of talk to and talk something through with her. And so that's, like comforting, but it hasn't always been that way. And so remembering like that, especially like in this episode or like in this like documentary that I was just watching, there was a point where Dan says something about like, if my son would have just called me, like if he would have told me like, this is what's going on, I don't know what to do, I feel like I need to use like blah blah, like just would have told me what was happening. There were different points. There's one point where he was like, I don't know how I would have reacted because of how judgmental I was toward other people that like did that. But there's another point where he was like, I would have listened. Like I would have been there for him. I would have done whatever I could. And I think that is so important that like you were having anxiety and you were able to call and talk to your dad. And I'm just think about like how much of a difference that could make for so many people. And I'm trying to express that to my sister now, because my sister and I were like, I'm trying my best to like help her stay clean. And like, there's just a lot of stuff that's like we talked about before, like a lot of mental health and things like that in this. And especially with me moving back to Clanton, I'm back here with her. And I keep telling her, I'm like, you are not used to having people that you can just go talk to. And I was like, but I'm someone that you can just go talk to. You can come to me and say, like, I'm really stressed out and I'm like, I really want to use drugs right now. And I'm going to be like, I hear you, dude. No judgment. Like, thanks for letting me know. What can I do? You know, if you like are really irritated or having like a bad like anger, because she has bipolar disorder. And if she's having like a really bad anger episode or like really, you know, just angry or anxious and she needs to be left alone for a while, I'll give her space and leave her alone for a while. You know, like having like, but that's something that she's not used to. And it's also something I'm not really used to having with family. Like with friends, I'm used to it because I've built really healthy friendships. But with family, that's why it's just really important to me now to like try and build that where it's like you can just talk to people without judgment, without like, you know, afraid of people bouncing. Because I have a little bit of a temper. So if somebody just is rude to me, I'm going to be rude back to them. But if somebody's like, look, right now I'm really mad and it's nothing at anybody right now, I'm just stressed out and I'm craving to go do drugs, I'm gonna be like, I hear you, cool, free pass, go take some time, do what you got to do, you know. And I just always think about how important that is. And I thought about it a lot throughout this, just thinking about that time in college when you were having, you know, just, I can't even remember what it was about. I think it was like a class or something you were stressed about or something. And you just went to your dad and he didn't have judgment. He didn't like, you know, he didn't say, well, you better get it together and work hard. It was like a, hey, breathe. Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, and I think the biggest obstacle to that, I think most parents, you know, want to have that type of relationship with their child where their child can approach them about any topic, no matter, you know, how taboo or, you know, against the parents' rules it is, because they care about that child. But from coming from a child's perspective, looking at a parent, it's you don't always see that, you know. Having, you know, transition now to being a parent, I understand a lot of things from this side of the fence that I, you know, never was able to wrap my head around before. I've had a lot of conversations with my parents like, okay, I totally get it now. You know, I get like, you know, how hard it was to, you know, build a relationship with me as a teenager, because as a kid you don't get that your parents love you unconditionally and that they'll do anything for you regardless of how whatever you tell them makes them feel, that they just care for you and your safety. You're always just like, oh, they, you know, they exist to, you know, punish me when I do stuff wrong. If I tell them that I'm doing something wrong, I'm going to get punished. But with stuff like this, like, your parents need to know. So because, or at least someone does. So, you know, you can't hold that in yourself. And that's, I feel
Yeah.
like, the biggest part of why these overdose deaths are so shocking is because the person has been doing this and hiding it, you know, and then it comes around and they get a bad batch and the parents are left wondering, you know, what they could have done differently.
Yeah.
And when in reality, it was a barrier, more likely a barrier on the child's side. They were afraid of repercussions. They were afraid of being punished. And so which, I mean, it's tough to find that balance as a parent. I mean, I'm not having to do much yet because, you know, she's only one year old, or almost 1 year old. But it's, you know, you have to walk that line of being like an open communicator, being like an open door. They can come to you with any problem they have, but also, you know, you have to discipline sometimes. You have to make them understand, like, you know, that decisions are bad. And so in a situation like this, it's, if your child does come to you, it's all about how you react. How you
Yeah.
react the first time they come to you with something like this is how they're going to expect you to react anytime after that. And so you know, it's always good to find a balance there where it's just like, you know, I don't approve of this, but I want to do everything in my power to help you. I don't want to hurt you more than you're already hurting.
Yeah. And I think that is so important. That's something that I was talking to just my mom and my sister about at different points in time because without giving too much detail or anything, there are situations where there are younger people in my family that might end up having to come stay with me at some point. And something that I was telling them about, I was like, you know, I get like my mom at different points is like worried about their childhood. And I'm like, I get that and I hear you. I am worried about their adulthood, you know, and like just being someone who like has that natural like caretaker instinct and that like almost maternal instinct. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but like I have more of like a nurturing, like maternal kind of drive where it's like I'm a mama bear, you know what I'm saying? And like I know that may sound weird, but like, you know, but that's just how I've always felt more leaning, especially because I guess I was more raised by my mom. So I picked up a lot more from like her type of disciplinary and like protective actions than what I would have my dad, you know? And so but there's certain things with those younger people that are in my family and everything. I just explain like, you know, I'm not like, I would have not said that I had a good childhood. There were aspects of my childhood that I like really enjoyed and I loved, and like I look back on those memories with fondness, but like I would say I like after childhood, after the first few years of being like an adult, like in college and everything, and I learned like how to be a human, if that makes sense, like learned how developmentally how to be like a functioning human being. I've had more fun in adulthood than whatever I ever did in childhood. And it's because I learned how to be safe. I learned how to have safe fun. I learned how to have a functional, fun night out without drinking and driving and without like buying things off you know what I'm saying? Like there's just a lot of stuff where it's like because I approached it with caution, I was able to have more of a relaxed fun than if I would have not approached with caution and just went buck wild, you know? And that's something that I tried explaining to like my mom and sister several times because they never really did the whole like traveling to other cities and doing that and living the city life and doing stuff like that. Like it was just very like they're still looking at, oh, well, their childhood, their childhood, their childhood. I'm like, childhood, yeah, like you want someone to have a good childhood, but at this point, like their childhood has already been so taken up by these things. I'm more focused on helping them learn how to be a functioning, safe, fun having adult because you're an adult for a lot more of your life than what you are a child. And those things that are in childhood, like you're meant to unbox those eventually. Even if you had a great childhood, there are things that you're going to look back on and be like, I really wish that would have been handled differently. It's just a normal thing, you know? And so that's what I was like, just told them. I was like, I want any younger person in my family, it doesn't matter if they ever live with me, if they ever, whatever, I want them to feel comfortable knowing they're not going to be punished if they make a mistake and they need my help. I'm going to help them, you know? Because in my head, it's like, if you had the decision making skills enough to go, I'm in too deep and I need help, you've learned your lesson. And really, that's what punishment, quote unquote, and discipline should be about, is learning a lesson. And so, like, you know, there might be a good stern talking to where it's like, okay, what did you learn? Are you going to do this again? What are steps you're going to take in the future to make sure you don't end up in a situation like this, to make sure the lesson really did land? But if they already like, you know, that's, I think we lose sight of that in society, that like discipline and punishment should be about teaching, not about serving someone right. Or, you know what I'm saying? It's about like, if they've already taken the responsibility and said, you know what, I'm in over my head, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done this, and now I'm going to do what I can to try and get out of it, and like responsibly, and I'm going to involve an older person in my family that can help me, you know? Like, to me, that's like, you learned your lesson, you get it, you know? Like,
Oh, definitely. And I mean, like it is like a, mentally exhausting process just to come to the conclusion that you're in too deep and to realize that for yourself. It's even more so to tell someone else about it. And but like I think you're entirely right that once you have that in your head, this is a problem and I need help if I'm going to get out of this. You've already, you've already been essentially rehabilitated for your mistake. You've realized the error of your ways. And I think the hardest thing is for that, someone realizes that they've been making mistakes and they've been doing things wrong, and then it's hard for them to tell someone else because they now know that you know what they've been doing to themselves has had awful consequences, and they've admitted it to themselves, but it's a whole nother story to admit it to
yeah.
someone else, and then even more of a thing to ask that person for help.
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple steps along that way, and it's each one's taller than the last.
Yeah. And I can imagine again, like the guilt that you could feel if it's somebody that you know you've affected. And like that's I thankfully, very thankful, haven't ever really struggled with addiction. I've struggled with like binge eating disorder, and I finally like I'm at a point in my life in my recovery where like my eating disorder does not affect me the way it used to. And I'm grateful, and it took a very long time for me to just like really get to the point where I'm at now. But the outside of that, and I would say the reason I compare that is because I've always said binge eating disorder to me feels more like an addiction than an eating disorder, because it's literally like you're addicted to the. And I talked to my therapist about it one time, my psychiatrist, and they were like, both like, you're absolutely right. For a lot of people that have binge eating disorder, not just binges within their eating disorder, but binge eating disorder, they like, I see it all the time. They approach it like it's an addiction. And because
Mhm.
it's the fact that it's a substance that like you can't escape. With drugs, like you can stay away from it, or like, and I'm making that sound a lot easier than what it actually is to have an addiction. But with food, you have to have food to survive,
Mhm.
and like no
There's
matter
no
what
good.
you, yeah, and like you have to eat, like if eating, the act of eating is what triggers your binging, it doesn't matter if you're eating like foods that are good for you or not. Just that feeling of eating is what's going to make you want to eat more. And
Mhm.
that was something that I explained a lot, was like, it doesn't matter if I have good foods around, like I'll just binge those. But that was like the first step in my recovery, was making sure that the things I binged were healthy foods, because at least then I was giving my body the energy it needed to like cope with the binging, because like digesting takes a lot of energy. But that's a whole other conversation for another day. But with that, whenever there have been situations where, and not even related to binge eating, but just like growing as a human, having toxic traits I had to grow out of and things like that, if there were people that I hurt in the past, I almost would like, if it was something where it was like someone I could easily access, I would always want to apologize to them and be like, hey, look, I'm really sorry. Like, revisiting this conversation, or like revisiting the situation now, I'm like, I realize I really did you wrong. And I recently just had that sort of conversation with somebody that is actually someone that I'm not going to say her name just because, like, for privacy purposes, but I talked about her in an episode last season, but I gave her an alias um in a friend breakup episode that Gabby, it was a 2-part episode that Gabby and I did together, and we talked about just like going through friend breakups, different points in our lives, and like how that affected us. And I've actually reconnected with or made amends with most of the people I mentioned in that episode, even just from a like not even if it's like a close friendship kind of way, but like a like just to make amends kind of way. And from that, it was because I realized, like, even at the point in my life now where I don't feel like a toxic human, like I feel like I've really outgrown a lot of my like toxic traits, and I'm very happy with who I am now. I still look back and be like, oh, I was a little guilty in that situation too. And like at that point, it becomes less about, well, this person hurt me more, so it doesn't matter, to, well, I still contributed to a negative situation, so I want to try and make it better. And so I did reach out to somebody here recently and like, just say, hey, like, I'm not taking full responsibility for the situation that happened between us, but like, I villainized you in a lot of ways, and that's not fair to you. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I blamed you for that I realize now that like I also just had as much contribution to that, because it was a mentality I had on the opposite end. Like I was projecting that onto you just as much as you were doing it. Like, so there were some instances where it may have not been you and it may have been me. And so with that though, like those people that I'm able to reach out to and make amends with, great. But people that I don't have that option, like I almost like box it away. And because I've boxed away the situation and I'm looking at it so differently, all I have are like really fond memories of them specifically, because I've boxed away almost like my part in their like in the toxicity of things. And so like I'll get really excited when I see somebody that I haven't seen in years, and I'm like, oh my god, hey, how are you? And they're almost like shocked that I'm excited to see them, and I'll like want to talk to them, and I'll get their information and stuff. And later on, like I'll just pick up on little things throughout the conversation where they seem like genuinely happy to see me once they realize I'm excited to see them. But I'll just think about it, and I'm like, why did they seem so off during the beginning of that and everything? Or like, what was that about? Like I only have fond memories of them. And then I'll realize like, oh, because we had like a falling out at some point, we didn't just stop talking. Like there was like drama that I contributed to, and I just boxed it away because it's something I'm ashamed of. And so then there's that guilt of like, well, now it's like hard to talk to that person without first giving them an apology. And so when you add like an addition to that, where it's like, I can say I'm not a toxic human now, and that doesn't affect me now. But like with addiction, that's something that you're always going to struggle with. And so then there's the guilt of like, well, I hurt this person with my addiction, or I impacted them with my addiction, and I'm still struggling. So how do I talk to them? How do I confide in them? How do I, like knowing that I've affected them, knowing that I could again slip up one day. And I think that, again, like I said, like in what you said, like having that opportunity just to be honest and be open. Like if you do mess up, just come talk to me. Like that will go so much further with me than if you pretend nothing happened, you know?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, open communication is key in so many aspects of life, including the ones we're talking about here. But I feel like, over time, it's become less and less common for people to just openly communicate and be honest with each other, because there's always paranoia of what is the stigma of what I'm about to say to this person? How are they going to react to that stigma? And with like, social anxiety being like a growing problem, especially within the youth, I think that's a major contributor to that, is just people are paranoid to talk about the stuff in their life that actually has consequence, because they're afraid of how the person they're talking to will react to that.
Yeah.
And I think that is like the hugest barrier for these people with addiction, because it's just like I mean, even when you are like actively in an addiction, I feel like, like you were saying, with your past relationships with people, you remember the happy times and you kind of box away the bad times and kind of sweep it under the rug. Same with people with addiction, because if you're addicted to a super harmful substance, and you're taking a bunch of it, you're going to have bad times with it every now and then, but you don't want to remember those, because you want to keep chasing the good times you've had with it, and that's a whole nother issue. And when you box those away, the bad times, it's harder, one, to realize within yourself that your behavior is becoming problematic. But
Yeah.
two, it becomes even harder to express that to someone else, because you're not remembering the negative effects that this addiction is having on you and the people around you. And it's tough, because it's not just open communication with others; it's open communication with yourself. You have to realize when you are kind of sweeping memories under the rug because they're uncomfortable for you, and your status quo. And you have to kind of reflect on that, and kind of go, hey, this is a problem. I'm hiding this aspect of my life from myself. And and then that's the first step. And then it gets to the point where you have to start, stop hiding that aspect of your life from other people if you're going to get help. And like I said earlier, it's multiple steps, and each one's taller than the last.
Yeah,
especially with
definitely.
that paranoia.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, that was a perfect way to put it too. It's just like, it has to start inward though, and like, that's something that I've been talking about a lot here recently, just because on my TikTok, I do like tarot card readings and stuff like that sometimes. And there's been a big message too of like starting inward. But I think that that's like a huge thing. I mean, I even talked about it on, like I said, the last episode that I recorded, which was with Hughes and Ben. If you can start inward and start to change things like in here, it becomes a little easier to figure out how to approach it outside. But so quickly we try to jump to like do a like shift around us when we haven't changed what's in here, and it all starts here. And that's the a big part of all of it. Like I remember, and I talked about this it wasn't on a podcast episode, actually, now that I think about it. It was some like someone I was talking to here recently, just because I'm a big believer in astrology and the stars and all that stuff. And so Mercury retrograde has been going on here recently, and it's a big time for like revisiting things and like revisiting lessons and like things like that, just depending on where it's at. And it's in Virgo right now, so which is your sun sign. So but for me, it's been having a large focus on just like revisiting lessons that I've learned, like when it comes to confrontation and stuff like that. And I have to say, I'm like really proud when I look at certain things, because there are things now that I do that's almost habitual, where it's like, if I'm trying to work through conflict with someone, I immediately like, I take a moment to like my emotions have a new place they sit in, where it's like they're over here where I can see them and I know what I'm feeling, so I'm not ignoring them, I'm not boxing them up and putting them away, but they're also set aside so they're not going to impact what I'm doing in the conversation I'm having. Like if somebody feels like I did something that hurt them, I can see that over here I don't feel like I did that, but like I can see here that that person does. So I'm like, okay, I recognize my feeling, but in this situation, this person is being honest with me and letting me know that they feel this way. So I'm going to offer them an apology, and I'm going to explain like what I meant, what I meant to do, so they know that my intention wasn't to hurt them. And then there you go. Because like an apology isn't like it in like something I learned in college too, and actually in one of the theology classes there, that an apology isn't an admission of guilt. It's an explanation for like the situation to give a little more detail. And so like being able to say, well, I'm so sorry that that I hurt you that way. Like, I promise that was not my intention. Let me explain. Like, that helps so much. And being able to take the emotions set aside and then deal with those too and give them that attention, that has been a big game changer for me in like handling conflict. And so I think that that's something that we're just not taught. And like, as people just, I mean, some people I'm sure are, but like, I had to learn how to do all of that on my own in different steps in therapy. Like, I learned that whole process in individual layers in therapy. And so many people are missing that. Listen, I'm a person that has big emotions too. So like, I can just imagine a lot of people who are struggling with addiction, they're probably just like me. Just have huge emotions. And I remember in our episode last season, we talked about escapism and people wanting to escape the current reality and get away from it and things like that. And even when watching the documentary, there was a point where there was a girl that was talking about how when she overdosed when she was a teenager on Oxycontin, that she just fell into this like she said that it was like the blackest hole she had ever been in. And she said that, a lot of people say that whenever they overdose and then like have a near death experience and, come out of it, they see this bright light, but that wasn't her. She just literally was in this dark hole and all of a sudden was awake again. And I literally for a split second was like, that must be a really nice feeling to just be like especially somebody who like struggles with like sleeping. Like, I have insomnia and stuff, and like I take medication, but it just like is very irregular. Like, it affects me differently every time I take it. And so like, I was like, that must be a really nice feeling to be able to just like go dark for a while. Because she said that she literally just like stopped existing. And immediately I was like, take that feeling, give it attention, but like, don't let it dwell, because that's probably the starting point for a lot of people, is that feeling of escapism. And I never really thought that I had a problem with escapism, but like seeing that and hearing her say that, I was like, that's where it could be, like, that's my slippery slope then, like that is where it could become dangerous very quickly for someone like me, who like, my problem is feeling grounded, but it's even like feeling grounded in my sleep, in my rest and things like that. And like, that drug through escapism can help me feel even deeper grounded in my rest. And so I was like, but at what cost?
Exactly. And that reminds me of, when there was a period of time in college where I was, really depressed, and you could argue that I became addicted to sleep for that very reason. I would sleep, 12 to 15 hours a day, just because I had no desire for the sensory overload that would happen to me when I woke up. And it became like a major problem, because something like sleep, it's like, how do you get addicted to sleep? But I remember I reached a point where it's just like, okay, this past week I've been awake for, maybe 40 hours total, and then, the rest of the time I've been asleep. And it was just like, why am I doing this? What am I so scared of that's happening around me, that I just am like retreating into my sleep? And it was exactly that. It was a form of escapism. I just, I wanted to be in that hole where I didn't have to deal with things happening around me. And
Yeah.
but I think it's interesting, like, if you talk about that from an overdose perspective, though, because when someone's taking a substance, they have like a way that makes them feel typically, and that's what they're chasing when they take that substance.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you overdose and you end up in that area, I see, I could see like a person like that being really conflicted about it, because
Mm-hmm.
it's the escape that they've been chasing, but at the same time, I'm sure it's absolutely terrifying as well, because
Yeah.
this is not the typical effect of the substance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember, I do remember that specific line in the documentary, and I remember thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it for a while, strictly because of that. Because
Yeah.
they're using the drug as an escape, they get a very extreme escape, and it becomes terrifying. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's impossible to escape from your problems so much that they come back in a way.
Yeah.
Maybe not manifesting themselves in the same
Yeah.
way, but it's the same, inner demons just, exposing themselves to you in a new way.
Yeah, it's like a loop. Like you've ran around the world and you ran so far away from your problems that they're right there where you left them. But now you're looking at them from a different angle. Yeah, I remember at that specific part too that she talked about how the police officer that was there in the hospital, like with her, she was like freaking out because she was like literally a teenager. She was like 16 years old, 15 or 16 years old. And she said that she was like begging them to help her breathe because they had her like strapped down to a bed. And she was like, I can't breathe, help me breathe. And she said that the police officer literally just she said she remembers very vividly, he looked down at her and just like shook his head, rolled his eyes, and walked off. And she like that image was ingrained in her head. And I feel like that is not just a like, because political views aside, whether you're like a Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter person, like whatever, that is a like really great representation, not just for like, not saying it about police officers, but about how like older generations look at younger generations. Like she is in crisis, like she literally almost died and is like begging for you to help her breathe. And she obviously didn't intentionally almost die. Like, and you're looking at her with judgment and walking away, and like the nurse is sitting there trying to help her. And I think that earlier you said that about like with the rising like anxiety in today's youth and everything. And that was such a perfect like thing to say. And I want to expand on it so much, but I feel like we would stay here for hours if I did that. But like so many times, like how many times do we like as a group, as a people, do our older generations look at our younger generations with just the attitude of like, oh, won't you shut up? Like, and it's like, no, like that is the problem. I mean, like men are made fun of for crying. And then like whenever there are these things that come out where it's like, men cry campaigns where it's like, no, men are supposed to have like full functioning feelings too. You still have the older like blue collar generations that are like, oh, you're just a wussy, and it's like, won't you shut up? Like let people develop. Let us, like, we're trying to change things. Like you're on your way out. We're the ones who are left here with the world. Let us change it to how we feel like it should be for us, not for you. You're not going to be here. Like let us develop. Let us like feel fully functioning emotions. Let people be, and that's the big thing too. Like yesterday, I got to go to this event and I sold at it for my Etsy store and for Enhance. And it was in my hometown, and it was this night market that was put on by this apothecary that is in my hometown. And it's been here for probably about 2 or 3 years now. And they, like when I very first moved back, I was so shocked to see that there was one here. And I was like, do you guys keep consistent business? They were like, yeah, we have, pretty consistent people that come in. And like, keep in mind, I live in a very conservative town, and I was like, this is really cool. And so I bought a bunch of supplies for them and stocked up. And like, I have not had to buy new stuff from them for a while because of that. They just like gave me a good bit and it was like a good deal and everything. Well, they hosted this night market that was in one of the parks that's in my county. And it was a really great event where a lot of local vendors got to come out, and like it didn't matter what you vended, like as long as you were some type of local vendor. And so they immediately, a bunch of the like Christian middle-aged moms on Facebook like started just hounding about this business and like protesting and stuff like that. But a lot of other people in our, like the younger people in the county were like started coming back and fighting it and being like, why don't you just leave people alone? And a lot of people were Christians too. And they were like, hey, like, this is not being Christ-like, like this is not being like loving to your neighbor and stuff like that. But one thing that was really cool was just seeing the mix of people that were there, because it was like a mix of like older people who were just like, hey, like you be you, I'm going to be me. I'll respect your existence if you respect my existence, and we'll, like it'll chill, And there was a booth for the local Democrats. And I'm one of those people, and I feel like you and I talked about this a lot before too. I don't like the two-party system, like in America. Like I'm I'm very liberal, but I'm very like the two-party system just causes divide. Like it's what's fueling the division in our country. And I say that from like, as someone who votes Democrat, like most of the time, I like, like as some, like that's me also saying like Democrats contribute to that, and not all Democrats obviously, but like the two-party system and the Democrats in charge, like that is what contributes to this, and it's like, but I mean, just as much as Republicans too, like it's the whole two-party system. And so but there was a booth there for like the local Democrats. And I was like, I want to go talk to them and everything. And it was a bunch of older people. And that also shocked me. I was like, whoa, it's like nothing but older people. And something they said is they were like, we're trying to get the younger people involved. Like that's why we can set up here, because there are a lot of younger vendors here. And I like am super excited to be involved with them. But I also like something that I want to nourish is like the feeling of, no, I don't want it to be like an us versus them thing. I don't want to like, if I have the power, I don't want to contribute to this whole like the rise in Democrats and stuff. I want to contribute to the rise in like liberal people, but like not if it's going to have long-term effects of more divide, And that's what, like, if people just sort of like had the mentality of everyone has their own experience, mind your business, let people have their own experience, and like mind your business, I feel like we would have a lot more of an open communication society where it's like, if you would be more willing to listen to people about their experience and understand why certain laws or certain rules should be put in place for them and how it doesn't affect you because you're not in that experience,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a big thing about that is just on both sides of the coin, it's just everyone wants everybody else to abide by what they think the rules should be. And when in reality there's got to be some sort of middle gray area where everyone can have the liberty to express themselves in the way they want.
Yeah.
Without other people just being like, you shouldn't be able to do this because, in my opinion, it has this social stigma and it shouldn't be allowed. There's always going to be social stigmas, but like, unless it's directly affecting you, why do you care? I'm a big proponent of that. I'm a big proponent of, just like allowing people to be themselves and express themselves in a way that they see fit. Allow them to be responsible for their lives, and you be responsible for yours, and to each their own. And the sad part is just everyone's too caught up in the identity politics. They just they want to do these things not because they want to advance our population as a whole, but because they want to show the other side that they mean business, which is not the way to run a government for the good of the people.
Definitely. I absolutely agree. And that's just, that's something that I say all the time. Like, if there's somebody that I meet, like I have friends here that I did not think this was possible, but I've always said, like, I would, if I met a conservative person, just because most of my friends are very liberal, if I met a conservative person that was like, well, yeah, I'm conservative, but I'm not saying that you have to be conservative. Like, you should have the right to be who you want to be, just like I should have the right to be who I want to be. If I ever met somebody like that, I'd be like, I respect you and we can be friends. And I weirdly, like, since coming back to Clinton, have met people like that are like, I'm more conservative and I have more conservative views, but I believe you should have the right to believe how you want to believe. Like, and I don't feel like the government or anybody or religion or anything like that should get in the way of you believing how you want to believe. And like, hearing that was so refreshing, and it helped me like solidify that, like, us versus them, like, destruction within my life, where it's like, okay, I finally like am able to say, like, I have met conservative people who are around my age that believe that I should have the right to live my life as long as it is not hurting anyone else, And I think that that's, like, I've said it 1,000 times, like, if I met somebody that, like, if they believe being gay is a sin, cool, you have every right to believe that. I will fight for your right to believe that. Don't get in my way. Like, that's the thing, is like, I will support you and your belief to whatever, but like, because you're not in my shoes, you're not experiencing my experiences, but like, don't do the same for me then. Like, I'm not experiencing your experiences. I'm living a different life. Support me and I'll support you, and if there ever became, and if there ever became an issue where like it, like being a Christian became persecutable, or like where it became illegal or something like that, you bet your ass I'd be like fighting against that. And I'd be like, no, like, I'm not a Christian, but people have the right to believe how they want to believe. Like, you know what I'm saying? And like, and I've been personally hurt by the Christian church and hurt by Christians before, but like, that doesn't mean all Christians are bad. That doesn't mean that like people should all of a sudden stop being able to believe what they want to believe. It just means that, again, people should have the right to believe how they want to, as long as it does not hurt other people, And that's the, like, I think that if we just approach situations like this, and like, even in the documentary, like, Dan talks about how his just like his observations on things just changed, you know, and like he started approaching things in a much more just like neutral standpoint, but it was still very driven by, I have to seek justice for my son, and now I have to save other people from going through what he went through, you know. And like
Mhm.
he didn't care if the person was black, white, like he didn't care if the person was like Christian, Republican, liberal, whatever. Like he wanted to save anybody because he was trying to save lives, like, and save lives from being disrupted. And like there were different points where he got a little impatient with like how slow it was taking the FBI and the cops and things like that. But like he was like, every single day that goes by, another person is affected. And that's the thing, is like we forget these are people who are affected by these things. Just because they believe different from you, just because they're having a different life experience, just because they struggle with addiction, just because they're a cop, just because they're whatever, they're a different person. You know, they are a person, a human being. And like, yes, I have my political views, and I will probably say like I support Black Lives Matter, but that doesn't mean that like I'm happy when police officers die. You know what I'm saying? Like that is a person, that is a human being, and we need to be figuring out a way to listen to others without it costing lives, you know.
And it wraps back around to that thing we were talking about earlier, just the open communication. Just, being able to speak, openly with someone. I respect your views. If you respect mine, we can disagree, but let's have a conversation regardless. I want to understand why you're coming from the point that you are, and I'm sure you want to understand the point that I'm coming from. But the issue is there's just not that dialogue anymore. If you express a dissenting opinion, everyone's just jumping on you, like labeling you with all these different things that
Yeah.
may or may not apply. But regardless, it's just no one wants to have conversations anymore about the issues. They just want to dig their heels in to what they believe on the issue. And if you're not in the same boat, we're butting heads, and it doesn't need to be like that. It really doesn't.
Yeah. And yeah, and I totally agree. Again, like we've said it several times about communication and everything. And one thing that I just thought about too whenever we were chatting is that there are different places. And the first time I ever heard about this was it was in Boston while a friend of mine was there working on like an HBO show. There are these, like, I forget what they're called, but they're like these setups where like medical providers will come and basically administer like clean, safe drugs to addicts, and like specifically like homeless people or people that are in poverty in the area that are addicts in that area too. And they can come receive, like, it's the safe administration of, like, most of the time it's meth, but they will do it at a point where it's like they're trying to wean you off of it, but they're giving these people like free health care, free health exams, medical prescription. And it's like you're getting these people that have not had like IDs, not had like a social security number or like their social security card and stuff like that. They haven't had any of this stuff in years, and they are finally being like redocumented, if that makes sense. Like medical history is finally being kept on them, where their whereabouts are, and it's like helping these people like kind of get back into society, even if it's just in the smallest ways. And like one of my friend, I didn't get his permission to talk about this because, like I said, I just thought about it, but he talked about how like what was really cool learning about it was that the nurses and doctors and things that go out and do this, they like, keep files on all of these patients. And if one of them don't show up one day, they like know in their notes, like, oh, well, this patient hangs out with this patient a lot, or they're in this area a lot, and so is this patient. Let me ask them if they've seen them. And it's like keeping tabs on them and like knowing like if they're, like if they've been abducted, if they have unfortunately passed somewhere, like, but it's allowing them to come and like treat their addiction in a safe way without having to get things off the street or do things that are more harmful for them for illegal drugs. And while also getting medical treatment, getting put back on medication that's going to help them with whatever, health issues they're having that may be impacting their use, their addiction and wanting to use drugs. It was just this really cool thing. And whenever I moved back to Clinton, I found out that there was one of those here too. And I was like, that is because meth for a while became like a huge problem here in Chilton County. And like, I remember whenever I would visit, whenever I was in college, or even whenever I was like, had just graduated college, it was terrible. I'd like walk through local grocery stores and things like that. And you would just see people that like, they were there, but they weren't there, you know? And like, that was something like the energy whenever I moved back was very different, where I was like, wow, something shifted, something has changed. And I found out that we have one of those here. And of course, there's people that are judgmental toward it, and there's like, stigmas and things like that. But it's like, I, being somebody who has only stepped in and out of Chilton County over the past few years, can see a huge difference, like a huge difference that this has made. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't care what the stigma is on it. Like, this is awesome. This helps,
Oh yeah, I mean, if it's doing something to, curb the addiction issues in our country in a safe way, I don't see what the problem is with it. It sounds like a brilliant program to me. I mean, it's acknowledging that people are going to use, whether it's legal or not, and it's taking that into account and saying, if you are going to do this, come to us. We'll ensure that you're safe in doing so, and we can also provide you resources to help you get clean and all. I think I have never heard of clinics like that. I think that is a brilliant idea. I need to look up and see if there's any nearby. I'm sure there probably is with the opioid problem in South Louisiana, but that's neat. I actually haven't heard of that. That's really awesome that cities and states are doing that.
Yeah. I mean, it's really just like, it was very heartwarming to find out that was here, because someone that I was talking to, which they're somebody that they're not judgmental by any means, and they're very open-minded, very kind. But I'll still leave their name out of it because I didn't get their permission. But when they told me about it, I was like, that's amazing. And they were like, oh no, they're like, it's not amazing. It's very shady and blah, blah, blah. But then they started explaining certain things to me. And I was like, well, no, that's like how they do it. Like, that's what it's for. Like, it's supposed to be that way. Because they were like, oh, well, it's just like all the local, like, druggies are going there. And I was like, well, that's the point. Like, they're going there to get to safely get what it is that they're craving, but also with the intention to not do it anymore, with the intention to get like a regular, what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, it's the point of like, this is a way that if we bred a society that was okay with like full honesty and vulnerability, everywhere could look like this. Like, this is like, people could start to get clean in a way that wasn't embarrassing, that didn't have like terrible, agonizing withdrawals, where they felt supported by their community, by their country, by their state. Like, this is what it could look like, and that just like, it kind of gave me a little bit of hope.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think well, while I agree with certain aspects of, having, really awful for you addictive drugs not be readily accessible, I think the prohibition and, the whole war on drugs has done more harm than good for people who are addicted, because instead of the focus being on rehabilitating these people, it's been on punishing them. And addiction is not, it's not, no one goes into doing drugs like wanting to get addicted. It's something that happens. Yeah. And once it happens to you, you have very little control over it. And it's better, it'd be better for you to be supported and have people helping to rehabilitate you, get you back to being, your 100% potential, rather than, okay, you're doing this, you've already tore your life up, we're going to put you in jail now.
Yeah.
I think exactly. That it really is a big step in the right direction for curbing the addiction problem in this country.
Absolutely. And having resources like that can help people like stop a problem before it gets worse. Like, like a lot of people that are in like jail and prison and stuff like that for other crimes, if you look at their history and see like drugs have been something they dealt with all the way up to that point, it's like if they would have gotten the resources they needed before this point, it would have stopped them from doing like committing a violent crime or being involved in this other terrible thing, if there was just resources around to start with. And I hope more people can become accustomed to that.
Yeah, I agree. I really agree. And it goes back to, the stigmas and people, digging their heels in with their identity politics, being like, okay, the people I watch on, the mainstream news think this is a bad thing, so it's a bad thing, but
exactly.
It takes really like looking at it and doing your own research and seeing, firsthand what, advancements like this can do for the community, and really understanding, it comes back to the fundamentals of addiction, just like how, it's, if you're addicted, it's like I said before, it's better to have, support, a safe space, people to help you, try to get clean, rather than just like, okay, you're doing problematic things, we're going to make everything worse for you. You're going to have to you're going to prison, you're going to have withdrawals for a week because we're straight cutting you off. It could kill you, depending on what substances you're taking. And I really think the shifting focus from penalization to rehabilitation is good. It's really good for the addiction problem in the country. And I think if we continue making steps in that direction, we could get to a point where, people have, all the resources they can need to get clean if they desire to.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good place to kind of shift toward closing. Do you have anything you want to add last minute, or anything that you want to give a shout out to, or I know that we want to talk about some resources and stuff that, people that are struggling with addiction might be able to utilize, if you want to give those.
There's one organization that I really wanted to kind of shout out here, because I've done a lot of work with them through my job, and I've seen like what they're doing for their community. And it's a really amazing thing what they've got going on. It's the Livingston Parish, Louisiana, SADD, SADD, Students Against Destructive Decisions. Livingston Parish is kind of the area where the fentanyl epidemic has been really taking off here lately. So they've been putting a lot of effort into raising awareness out there, having events for kids and students to go to and actually learn about the consequences of these drugs, how they function, the chemical composition, the effects on the body, and all of that. And they've been just doing great things for just spreading awareness in that area, which is an area that really needs it. And I personally know a couple of people that founded it and run it, and it's a great organization. And that's actually, I met Dan through them at one of their events.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool, and I love that he's like there supporting it too. Like that's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, any types of those events around the state, at least. I'm pretty sure he does some nationwide as well, but especially in Louisiana, he's always at the events. He loves talking to the students, explaining, how, good strategies for avoiding situations like his son ended up in, telling his story, and which I feel like that's kind of what has the most effect on kids in regards to them understanding situations like this, is just when you hear from someone that it has affected their life in a very just like personal and traumatizing way, And so I think it's really great that he's still out there doing what he does, spreading awareness. Yeah. He's still it's still the opioid epidemic, regardless of if he's shifted from Oxycontin to heroin to fentanyl. I mean, that's only because these drugs are getting more potent and they're killing more people, and he's doing the best that he can to try to stop that, like he's been doing since the 90s.
Yeah, I'm taking some notes too, because I want to put that in the show notes and everything, just like see if I can find the website or at least get the information for it. So you said it was the Livingston Parish SADD?
Yes.
SADD?
Yes, I have a couple logos I could send. I also use with one of the founders if you're interested in that. But
yeah, definitely. I mean, I would love to anything. I mean, honestly, what we're trying to do too, and I'm fine, with saying this on the podcast and everything, we're trying to get more information on our blog too. So something I've been thinking about doing is going, and whenever there's episodes that are about topics like this, writing a blog piece for it too. So that would be perfect to put in there, is like put the logo and put different things like that, and just links to different areas, especially because like even in that documentary, they talked about how much it has affected Louisiana, so any resources within Louisiana is definitely going to be good too, for people that would watch that documentary and maybe in the area or something like that, or even being able to Google, like, is there a SADD for Chilton County, Alabama? Is there a, is there this for somewhere else? So just knowing where to start looking for somebody who needs help, that's a big thing. It's just like, okay, I can start looking for these specific resources. But yeah, to end off too, I just went ahead and Googled some resources earlier when we were chatting too, and Chase mentioned this really awesome thing that is a fentanyl test strip. And I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, that's really cool that, and again, we aren't condoning the use of illegal substances, but we are also recognizing like, this is an addiction. This is a like deep rooted problem that is like very, very like just infested in our society. And it's not easy for people just to be like, okay, I'm not going to use them because they're bad for me, And so I think that the shift for focus is to like make sure people are staying safe in their journey to try and not do drugs. And so he mentioned that there are test strips for fentanyl, to where if you're doing anything like, I mean, and we even talked about how earlier there was like a vape pen or something like that that it was in. And so this would be a good resource for anybody that is in a community that there may be a lot of that. The fentanyl test strips, I found information about it on the CDC's website, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and it has just a whole article about it's under their stop overdose option, and you can go to fentanyl facts. And fentanyl is spelled Fentanyl, and I just spell it just because everybody pronounces it differently, and so I did not know how it was spelled when I very first started like hearing the word, and so I wanted to go ahead and just spell it. But yeah, it's fentanyl test strips. Definitely check out this article on the CDC website. I'll link it in the show notes, and hopefully, somebody might be able to utilize it and see how to acquire some of these test strips for, if they want to start testing things that they're having, like coming in contact with. Another good resource for anybody that is struggling with addiction and wants to seek help, I just offered a quick Google, and I'll put this in the show notes too, is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. And it's just a national administration where they can give you resources and talk you through certain situations, refer treatment and things like that. It's totally confidential, and their main phone number is 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-HELP or 1-800-662-4357. So, cool. Well, that is all you got today, Chase. Thank you so much. I know we went over a little bit because of some technical difficulties and everything, but I appreciate you for being on and just helping share this awareness and share your experience and everything. And again, I think it was super helpful that the first time we got to talk about this, you were talking about it from almost like a child perspective, like someone's child. And now you're getting to talk about it as a father to a baby that one day will be in this world. And I think it's super impactful to talk about like, what can we do now to make a better future for our young people of today, and as young people too, saying that, like trying to go ahead and start that now, I think that's super admirable and just like I think we need to keep having conversations like this. And maybe next season we'll have a part 3, who knows?
Well, I'd be open to it. Thank you so much for having me back. I always really enjoy coming on the show. And talking with you about everything. You always have really great perspectives on these issues. It's always great to talk to you. And one more thing I'd like to mention is we're talking about the fentanyl test strips. I believe there are some organizations that you can get them for free. So if someone out there is worried about pricing or affordability for that, especially if they're using or addicted, there are organizations, I believe, that might even like ship them to you. I know you can definitely show up to like awareness events, and they typically have them handed out for free there. But yeah, anytime I go to those events, they always have a table full of them. So it's good that those are becoming more mainstream, and hopefully we can start getting those into the hands of people that really need them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for pointing that out too. Again, like I said, this was my first time ever hearing about it, and this was totally Chase like brought this information to the table. So again, thank you so much, Chase, and thank you for just sharing that. And like I said, I'll put all the links in the show notes and everything, and hopefully, if you need these resources, hopefully what we put in the show notes will have something that will help you get there. And definitely, Chase, next time you see Dan Schneider, let him know that you're on a podcast and that we talked a lot about him.
Will do. Yeah, I'll definitely let him know. He'll love it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning back in. And this was Enhanced Season 2. Thank you so much for listening to Enhanced Podcast. I am Sam, one of your hosts.
And I'm your other host, Gabby Sabai.
If you want to find me on social media, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at SamDifYouDo.
You can find me on TikTok at GabbyS80 and on Instagram at GSABAT97.
And if you want to follow the podcast, you can find us on Instagram and on Facebook at enhanced.productions.publishing.
And check us out on our website at enhanced.productions. Enhance your peace,
your joy,
and your existence.